Hey everyone, so I've played a bit more Squadrons since my last video on it, and I just wanted to share some of my favorite loadouts for the different ships. I'll be making a Star Citizen video soon though, as 3.11 just went live, so I'm gonna hop right on there as soon as the downtime's over. So back to Squadrons, I actually haven't played a ton of the multiplayer since I was working my way through the campaign for most of my time so far. I did enjoy the campaign, but I don't think I'm going to make any videos on it just because I don't think it would be that interesting. It was good enough if you're playing it yourself, but I just don't think it would be that entertaining to watch because it's got pretty lengthy dialogue and a lot of the missions are very similar to each other, just doing sort of escort things. So yeah, I have been enjoying the multiplayer though, and there's a lot of freedom in how you set up your starfighter. So I don't want to say these setups that I'm going to be sharing are the best because I haven't played enough to guarantee that, but I have been using them and I'm getting pretty good results with it. Alright, so first I'm going to start off with the fighters, and by that I mean the balanced fighters, which are the X-Wing and the TIE Fighter. Now these are balanced because they can take on both other fighters as well as capital ships, and they do a good job at doing both, and they've got a bit more health than interceptors. So you can see here I've chosen the standard laser cannon, and I have tried out the others, but I just find that the standard one is the easiest one to hit targets with for me right now, and the other ones that can do more damage when they fire in bursts or if you've charged them up, or it's just too hard to hit moving targets with, at least for right now. So I might change this at some point when I get a bit better at aiming, but I found that the standard laser cannon is pretty solid. Okay, and then this next item is one that I'm always going to have equipped whenever it's available, which is the repair droid. So this could be different if you're playing with friends and you knew that you were going to be able to get repairs from them, but since I've been playing solo, I can't really count on anyone in the support ship to support me and repair my hull damage, and since hull damage doesn't regenerate, it's very nice to have this ability to be able to regenerate your hull. Okay, so now the next thing, I've chosen a missile, and in choosing missiles I generally try to go for the one with the lowest lock-on time when I'm thinking about missiles that I'm going to be using against other starfighters, because if you have the target in your sights long enough to lock one of these longer lock-on time missiles, I feel like you'll be able to hit them enough times with your lasers that it's not even going to be worth it. So this missile actually locks on very quickly and then disables them so that you have a good opportunity to get some shots in. So it's very useful for that role, and the low lock-on time makes it very easy to land these. Okay, so then next for countermeasures, I pretty much stuck with these seeker warheads on all of the other ships as well, because they are very effective in terms of their countering the warheads. I've pretty much found that unless I'm getting locked onto from very close, these are going to counter the missiles as long as I engage them at the right time. There are other options, and other ships do have more options, but the cooldown time on these is very important because you're going to want to be able to counter missiles pretty frequently. And even though things like the sensor jammer are useful, especially for dogfights, its cooldown is just way too long. I might experiment with the particle burst in the future, but again, with dogfights it might be difficult because in order for it to work, in the description it says you have to fly in a straight line to ensure that the missiles fly through the thing, and if you're flying in a straight line, then you're probably going to be getting hit by lasers. Okay, so next we have the hull, and this is similar to the repair droid in that I always equip this one when I can. So, as you've probably seen in the footage, and if you've experienced playing the game, you know that you're always getting locked onto. So just having this hull to make it so that you don't have to constantly worry about missiles coming your way, I think is more than worth the 10% health decrease. Whenever ships have this dampener hull available, I always equip this. And then since I already have so much invested in the hull to stop missile lock-ons and the good countermeasures that'll be able to frequently stop missiles from hitting me, I've gone for this ray shield because it'll decrease the amount of damage that I take from lasers, since I don't intend to be taking any damage from missiles. There is that drawback that if you do get hit with a missile, it's pretty bad, but playing with this loadout, I very rarely get hit with missiles. Okay, and then last but not least, I have the standard engine again. This one is also kind of situational, so if you're dogfighting, you don't really need as much top speed because you're going to want that high turn rate to be able to keep your enemies in front of you and turn around to deal with people who are behind you. So that's why I also use this micro thrust engine, but the standard engine is actually just a pretty good all-rounder.
Empire doesn't stand a chance.
Okay, so next I'm going to actually move on to interceptors, and interceptors are similar to fighters except they really are only good at taking out other fighters. So this includes the A-Wing and the TIE Interceptor. So yeah, they can do some damage to capital ships, but their damage output is less sustained than the other fighters or the bombers, so that's why they're a lot better at taking out fighters. Also, they're a bit more maneuverable and faster than the X-Wing and the regular TIE Fighter. Okay, so again, I've gone for the standard laser cannon, and I like this mostly because the other options either do less damage or are just very hard to land shots with. At some point I might switch to something like this burst laser cannon, but I just find it difficult to use because you have to charge it up and then release it at the right time. And also the limited range on these other options can also be pretty difficult to use. And then again, as my left auxiliary, I've gone for the repair kit. Whenever something like this is available, I think it's pretty wise to have it equipped unless you know you're going to be playing with a squadron of people who you know are going to be healing you. So then for my other auxiliary, again I've gone for missiles with very fast lock-on times, because if you're going to be behind someone for long enough to lock a missile that takes a long time to lock, then you probably should be shooting them anyway. So the cluster missile could also be a pretty good option because it's got an even lower lock-on time, but it has a pretty high cooldown, so it depends on how many targets you think you're going to be engaging. But this does do an overall greater number of damage if all of the missiles land on their target. So if you think you're going to be wanting to do damage to support ships or bombers, this might be a better option. However, for just dogfighting, where most people are going to be using interceptors or fighters, I think these quick lock missiles are a good balance of lock time, damage output, and cooldown. Here I've gone with the Seeker warheads, just because they consistently seem to take out the missiles for me. I have had some good luck with this sensor inverter, and it is a more offensive option because it does send the missile back at the attacker. But again, that cooldown is just pretty high, and those extra 6 seconds that you don't have your countermeasure can make a big difference. So then again, I've gone for the dampener hole. Doubling your enemy's lock time is just so valuable. This one is pretty easy to justify. Okay, so for shields I have tried some of the other options both in multiplayer and in the campaign, but I found that overall capacity doesn't really matter as much as regen rate. So the standard shield is a good balance between capacity and regen rate, but sometimes I like to go for the one that increases your regeneration. I think for dogfighting, the regen focused shield is better because you're not going to have as much opportunity to escape from your opponents, and you're going to want to have that regen going as often as you can. But for stuff like fleet battles where there's dips between the combat, then the standard one is a good balance. And then again for the engine, it depends on what you're doing, but I haven't really found top speed to matter that much, and especially in an interceptor, the only thing that's going to be faster than you, even if you do go for this micro thrust engine to get better turn rates, are going to be other interceptors. So definitely for dogfights I leave this one equipped, but in fleet battles it's more of a personal preference. However, I wouldn't recommend going for any of the ones that are top speed focused, because your turn rate is just very important, because it determines whether or not you're going to be able to line up a shot or deal with someone who's right behind you. Okay, so moving on to the bombers, and these include the Y-Wing and the TIE Bomber. So this class of ship can work in dogfights, but it lacks the ability to repair itself, so you're dependent on the repair pickups around the map if you do take hull damage, so that is a big downside. Also, it's very slow and not very maneuverable, so I think as people get better and better at flying in your blind spot, it's going to be a lot harder to use. Right now though, it is pretty good because it has quite a high damage output and quite a high health pool. Where this really shines though is fleet battles and specifically doing damage to capital ships. So for the primary weapon, I have something that'll help it fulfill that role, and that's the heavy rotary cannon. It isn't great for dealing with starfighters because you have to wind it up in advance, so you have to know when your shot's going to be lined up, which makes it easy to use against big capital ships but harder to use against fighters. However, it does have a really high DPS, and it can sustain that for quite a while. So if you are going to want to dogfight with the Y-Wing, you might want to stick to the standard laser cannon, but if you're going to be doing any sort of bombing role, then I would recommend the rotary cannon. Okay, and then again, like I mentioned earlier, the ship does not have any sort of repair function, which I would say is its biggest weakness. So you do have a few options for what you want to use as your auxiliary components. So I've just left the automatic ion cannon on, because this can help when people decide to get behind me. But another equally as good option is the Seeker Mine, because it does sort of the same role of getting a fighter who's tailing you off of your tail. I'd say you probably want to have one of those because you are going to have people getting behind you in this ship, since it just is a lot slower and less maneuverable. And then for the right auxiliary, the multi-lock missile is just a very good missile. It can do a lot of damage to capital ships if you choose to lock it against them, but it's also good against fighters. There are other options if you want to focus solely on dealing with capital ships, but again, I'd say only do that if you know your squadron is going to be able to support you and help you deal with other fighters. With this loadout, the missiles do help against fighters, but still can be used against capital ships, so I like having that versatility playing solo. So I've gone for the same countermeasures here. I'm not going to go over that again. And I've also gone for that same dampener hole. And then I've also gone for the ray shields again. The ray shields on this one aren't quite as good of a fit though, because if your countermeasures are on cooldown, it is going to be a bit harder to avoid those missiles by outflying them, since the ship is kind of slow. So you might want to just stick with the standard shield on this one. And then for the engine, I've gone with the standard engine because I don't think any of the sacrifices that the other engine options give you are worth making. If there were one that increased your maneuverability, I might go for that, but all of these are just focused on increasing your max speed or your boost, and you're always going to be slow flying this thing, so I don't think there's much point to equipping anything but the stock engine. Okay, now the last category are the support ships, which are the U-Wing and the TIE Reaper. So I'm just going to say I haven't had a ton of time in these because it is kind of hard to play in a support role if you don't have a squad of players that you know and you're going to be playing with. But I have tried them out just to see how they perform. So again, I've gone for the standard laser cannon. The ion cannon is very good, but you also have to rely on your squad mates to take out whatever ships you disable because it doesn't really do any damage to their hull, it just disables them. So if you're really coordinated, I'd say go for this, but if you're just playing solo, then just stick with the standard cannon. And I don't think I'd really recommend auto-aim on any ship because you're just losing out on too much DPS to really be that useful. Now for my left and right auxiliary, I've gone for support items, which help this ship fill its role. So the supply droid will help rearm or repair a targeted ally, and the auxiliary shield will give an extra shield to your allies. Since the ship is not really ever going to be the best thing at taking out fighters or capital ships, I think it's best to lean into its role of being a support ship. So you can equip missiles and stuff like that, but I think you'd always want to have the supply droid, and the tactical shield is also nice to have as well. So now here for the countermeasures, I have gone for something different than the other ships, and I've actually gone for the sensor jammer. So earlier I'd complained about its long cooldown time, but with this ship I don't feel like it's quite as big of an issue, because since you're going to be in a support role, you don't really have to be up and engaged in the fight, and also you're not going to be dogfighting in this. So since you can kind of control when you're being engaged upon, it's nice to have that full safety from all missiles. So that 4 seconds of not being locked onto can really help you get out of a bad situation if you have to retreat. And then for the duration of its cooldown, you can just continue to be a support ship, but from farther back than you might otherwise. Okay, so for the hull, I've gone for this deflector hull, which increases your shield health, but decreases your hull integrity. And the reason I've gone for this is because while you can heal your teammates, it's very difficult to heal yourself. So since you're probably going to be the only support ship on your team, I wouldn't expect to have anyone else who's going to be healing your hull damage. So I think it's better to just have more of your health and shields, since those will be able to regenerate without getting healed or retreating to one of your frigates to heal your hull integrity. So with shields, I've stuck with the standard shield because none of the other ones have trade-offs that I'd really like to make. None of them really increase the regeneration of the shield, and actually most of them decrease the regeneration rate of the shield. So yeah, I think the standard shield is just the best option here unless you have a very special use case. And then for the engine, there's not really a right choice here. I do generally use the microthrust engine, but this ship isn't really going to be engaging in many dogfights anyway, so you might enjoy just having the slight extra speed that the stock engine provides so that you can get into the battle quickly if you need to heal and support teammates. So I would say either go with the standard engine or the microthrust engine, and both of those are good options. So those are the loadouts that I use, and I'm not going to go over the Imperial ones because as far as I can tell, it's the same stuff but with different names and without shields for everything but the Reaper. And also if I did, this video would be really long. So anyway, those are the loadouts I like using, and let me know what you guys like to use if you've been playing this game in the comments. So be on the lookout for a video about 3.11, which just came out sometime later this week, and thank you guys for watching.